Okay, a parabola can be defined as a set of all points in a plane that are the same distance from a given point called the focus and a given line called the directrix. Okay, the focus is this point right here. The directrix is this line right here. The line segment through the focus of a parabola and perpendicular to the axis of symmetry is called the latus rectum. That's this line right here. So through the focus and perpendicular to the axis of symmetry. So the standard form of the equation of a parabola with vertex HK and axis of symmetry x equals h is y is equal to a times the quantity x plus h squared plus k. Okay, and that's with a vertex HK. Now, if a is greater than 0, okay, so a is positive, k is the minimum value of the related function, and the parabola opens up. So if that k or a value out front is a positive number, your parabola opens up. If a is less than 0, so it's negative, your parabola will open down. So an equation of a parabola in the form y equals ax squared plus bx plus c, or x equals ay squared plus by plus c, is the general form. Any equation in general form can be written in standard form. The shape of a parabola and the distance between the focus and directrix depend on the value of a in the equation. So this is our table of equations for parabolas. Okay, so your form, okay, the form of the equation depends which way it's opening. Okay, so the y equals a times the quantity x minus h squared plus k is when you have a normal parabola. So that's opening up and down. When you have an x equals parabola, that's going to open left or right. Okay, so this one is in this shape. This one is in this shape. Okay, so when you have a y equals, it's your normal parabola shape. When it's an x equals, it'll open left or right. So that has to do with your direction of opening. So if a is greater than 0, I know purple's kind of hard here, it's going to open up, and if a is less than 0, it's going to open down. Okay, so that's your up and down one. This one, if a is greater than 0, it will open to the right towards your positive numbers because a is positive. And if a is less than 0 or negative, it'll open towards your negative values, so to the left. Okay, and I'm going to write that here. So if a is greater than 0, opens up. Less than 0, opens down. If a is greater than 0, to the right. If a is less than 0, to the left. Now your vertex in both of these equations is at HK. Okay, you can find H and K in your standard form here. Okay, so H is in the parentheses for this one, and K is on the outside. In this one, K is inside the parentheses, and H is on the outside. Okay, but your vertex point is still at HK in both cases. Okay, the last thing that we're going to deal with today is the axis of symmetry. Okay, so that's the line that your parabola reflects over. Okay, for a y equals equation, your axis of symmetry will be an x equals. And for an x equals equation, your axis of symmetry will say y equals. So it's just the opposite. So this one is a vertical line. This one will be a horizontal line. Okay, so your axis of symmetry for the normal parabola is a vertical line. That's why it's x equals. And for your sideways parabola, it is a horizontal line. That's why it's y equals. So those are the only things we're dealing with today. Today, actually, we're completing the square to write it in standard form. Okay, so we're trying to write these in standard form, and then we want to identify the direction, the vertex, and the axis of symmetry. Okay, so that's what we're going to do on the back. So we want to write this equation in standard form and then identify the vertex, axis of symmetry, and direction of opening. Okay, so to write this in standard form, we need it to either say y equals or x equals. So I always identify which one of my values has a squared. Okay, so I have an x squared value, right? So that means my equation is going to be a y equals. Okay, I don't have a y squared, so I need to make this say y is equal to. So I'm going to just rewrite that equation. And I want to move everything so that I just have y equals. So I'm going to subtract 2x squared and subtract 32. Okay, so I have y is equal to negative 2x squared minus 16x minus 33. Okay, so we are in the form y equals a times x minus h squared plus k. So that's the form we want to get it into. Now in order to do that, we have to complete the square. So to complete the square, I'm going to look at just these first two terms right here. Okay, with those two terms, my value in front of x squared, I need to factor out. So I need to factor it out. So if I factor out that value, it is negative 2. I'm left with x squared plus 8x. And I'm only factoring it out of those two terms, not that last one. Okay, only factoring out from those two terms. Okay, because when I complete the square, I don't want an a value in front of that x squared. Okay, so when completing the square, we have to add something to our left-hand side of the equation. And inside those parentheses where I just factored something out. Okay, so to complete the square, you first had to factor that value a out. So now your a value in front of x squared is 1. And now we want to complete this square. So to find out what I'm adding on here, we need to take our b value from inside of our parentheses, divide it by 2, and square it. Okay, so our b value inside those parentheses is 8. So we have 8 divided by 2 squared. Okay, 8 divided by 2 is 4, right? 4 squared is 16. So I'm going to add a 16 into that blank space there. So here I'm just rewriting, so I have that blank space plus y is equal to negative 2 times the quantity x squared plus 8x plus, and I added 16 here. Now whatever I do to one side, I have to do to the other side. However, since I have this -2 out front, I need to multiply these two terms together. So I need to multiply those. Now when I multiply those, what do I get? -32. That is what needs to go on this side. Okay, so I would have -32, not 16. You have to remember to multiply these because that's technically what I added on to the right-hand side. Because if I were to distribute that back in, I would have -32. Okay, and that's what I'm adding on to the right, so I need to add that on to the left. Okay, from here I need to finish completing the square. So that means I need to factor what's inside of my parentheses here. So if you don't know what completing the square means, it means you're going to have a quantity squared. Okay, I need to have this quantity squared. Okay, so if I were to factor this, what multiplies to 16 and adds to 8? Multiplies to 16, adds to 8. You should get the same number when you complete the square. Okay, you should always get the same two numbers for that. So we have -32 plus y equal to -2. Now this is factored. Okay, so I would have x plus 4, and technically I'd have x plus 4 times that, right? So for completing the square, it's just that quantity squared. Okay, so it's x plus 4 times x plus 4, which is just that quantity squared. And then I still have this -33. Now this is getting really close to what it needs to look like, right? It just needs to be a y equals instead. So to get it as y equals, I need to add 32 to both sides. Where? I can't help you with that. Okay, when I add 32 to both sides, I have y is equal to -2 times the quantity x plus 4 squared minus 1. Okay, so this is your standard form for that equation. Well, now I have to say what the vertex is, axis of symmetry, and direction. Okay, so your vertex for this parabola is at HK. Okay, so H, I'm gonna move it down just a little bit here so we can see the standard form. H is inside of the parentheses. So inside of these parentheses, but notice this is negative. You're taking the opposite of your H value. Okay, so the opposite there is -4. Now I don't take the opposite for K because I'm adding it on. So my K value is just -1. So that would be your vertex. Okay, axis of symmetry. If you flip to the front, it tells you what the equation for the axis of symmetry is. Okay, it is x is equal to h. Well, you just told me what h was. It's -4. So our axis of symmetry is that x is equal to -4. Last, we need the direction. Okay, direction again is on the front. So I'm looking at my A value for the direction. My A value is -2. What? But this one is either up or down. So if your A value is negative, which is less than 0, okay, I'm going to flip to the front here really quick. We are in this form, so I'm using this column. Okay, so our A value is less than 0, so it's going to open down. So I would just say direction is down. Okay, questions? Do you remember completing the square? You've all done that before. All right, we're going to do one more. Okay, one more. Please make sure you're writing these down step by step so you can follow it when you have your next quiz. Okay, so you can follow what I wrote down. Write it down, word for word, what I do. Hey, I'm talking to you. Write it down word for word how I do. I gave you a pencil. Now you're writing it down word for word how I do. You're not skipping steps. You're writing the whole thing down. For number 2. So we want to write 2x minus y squared equal to 4y plus 10 in standard form. So again, first thing I do is look for which value is the squared one. Okay, that is y in this case. So that means this equation is going to be in the form of x equals. Okay, so since that y value is squared, this will be in the form x equals. So I need to get x by itself. So first, just rewriting my equation here. I want x by itself, so I'm going to add y squared to both sides of that equation. And then I need to divide by 2. Okay, so think of y squared having a 1 in front of it. So I'll have x is equal to 1/2 y squared plus 4 divided by 2 is 2. And 10 divided by 2 is 5. Okay, what is my next step? Looking up at the other problem. What did I do next once I got that variable equal to the other side? What do I do next?
You would put the little, you gotta do you pull the half out. Yeah,
You pull the half out of these two terms with a y. Okay, not the 5, but we need to factor out 1/2. When I factor out 1/2 from 2, I get 4. By the way, not 1. I get 4. Because if I multiply 1/2 by 4, what do I get? 2. Yep. Okay, next, this is where I need to add something to this quantity to complete this square. Okay, whenever I add something to one side, I have to add it to the other, so I add in these blank spaces here. And again, to get this value, we're taking b over 2 and squaring it. Okay, and it is the b value inside of your parentheses. And that is 4 divided by 2 squared. It is just 4. Okay, so I have that blank space. I'm adding 4 to this one. And again, when I add 4 here, I have to multiply my first term by that term I just added in. Okay, so these two together, we have to multiply. Okay, and that is to get this one over here. Okay, so 4 times 1/2 is what? 2. So I should add 2 to the left-hand side there. Next, I want to factor what's inside of these parentheses. Okay, so what multiplies to 4 and adds to 4? Again, it should always be the same number here. Okay, it should always be the same number. That's what you're doing when you're completing the square. It should be a perfect square. So I'll have 2 plus x is equal to 1/2 times the quantity y plus 2 squared. Okay, so again, it would factor into y plus 2 times y plus 2. That is just that quantity squared. Okay, it's multiplied by itself. Then we have plus 5. So again, I just want x by itself. So we'll subtract 2 from both sides of that equation. To get our standard form. Okay, now our standard form is an x equals. And we have to now label our vertex. Okay, so in your x equals equation, that's of the form x equals a times the quantity y minus k squared plus h. Now, your vertex is still hk, but now our h is in a different spot. Okay, so h would be 3 in this case. Okay, now our k has that negative in front of it, so we need to take the opposite of the value we have for k, which is -2. So that would be our vertex. Okay, then our axis of symmetry, again, we're looking on the right-hand column on the front of your note sheet. Okay, right-hand column on the front of your note sheet. Your axis of symmetry is y is equal to k. Okay, and we had k is -2, so we'll have y is equal to -2. Last one is the direction of opening. Okay, so this one I need to look at that a value in front. Okay, so our a value is greater than 0. Since it is greater than 0, and we're looking at these ones here, okay, a is greater than 0, so which way does it open? To the right. Okay, questions? That's all we're doing today is completing the square and then labeling vertex, axis of symmetry, and direction.